Please listen carefully.
Our job is to reflect the life of the region and the most important stories in the region. So you have a slightly different approach to the stories that you're doing, because inevitably when you're talking to a national audience, you're going to explain things in a slightly different way to the way you explain it to a local audience. You give much more detail about the places and the people and so on and so forth relevant to the east of England. Well, stories come from all sorts of places, but mainly they come from talking to people. So the best source of a story is contacts. If you talk to someone, you will almost certainly get a story. And if you don't get a story, you'll get an idea for a story. So we have to choose the stories that we think travel. It means what's going to have impact to the most number of people, what's going to be relevant to the most number of people. What's a story that people think, wow, that's interesting, I haven't heard that before, that really affects me. And of course, because we work in television, what else do we need? We need great pictures. New technology has changed everybody's lives, but it's changed journalists' lives, and I would say for the better. We've got new ways of communicating with our audience, so that's why social media has been such a valuable thing for us. But it's also a way for us to get the stories out there. When you're talking about journalists, they used to go out on a story with a cameraman, a sound man, sometimes a director. They needed an editor when they came back to base to turn it into a piece of television. Now they can do it all themselves. So that's very liberating for an individual. I think journalists have always found that journalism is a very competitive field to get into. And that's not a surprise, because it's one of the most exciting professions you can do. It's a very changed environment though, because everybody has access to the means to tell stories now. But what I would also say to the journalists is don't worry about that, because not everybody can be a really good journalist. So those people with inquiring minds will still be able to work in an environment where news and information is all around us. I think journalists who are starting in the industry are more multi-skilled than they've ever been. I think there is a danger that in a lot of the skills that they learn, because they're learning so much about the technology and how to use cameras and how to edit, what we mustn't forget is they also need to learn about the craft of journalism itself. So there is important things to teach today's journalists about journalism, also about how they deliver the journalism, but never lose sight of the fact that when you're a journalist, you need to learn skills that enable you to tell stories, find stories, tell stories, and then when you've got that in your head, also understand how the technology works so that you can confidently ask questions when you're doing an interview, as well as confidently film that interview. Politics informs huge amounts of what the news is all about, sets the tone really in any country, and news should be very concerned with what's happening in the political world, and the political world pays attention to what's happening in the news, so the two are completely linked. But most important for an organisation like the BBC, and I can really only talk on behalf of the BBC, is that we remain independent and impartial at all times. So everything even-handed, no favouritism towards any party, and no behaviour or interviewing that suggests that you're against any particular party. You should be as challenging of one party and the government as you are of the opposition. There's no prizes for running something quickly and then finding it's wrong. In the end, your reputation is damaged, your ability to function as a news organisation is fatally flawed. It's just not worth it. Always be right. You have to learn, partly instinctive, but partly what you learn, the ability to judge whether or not that person is genuine. And you have to do the same as regards pictures, as regards any information that comes your way. Is it genuine? How can I check it? How can I cross-check it? Is there another source that says this is the case? Is it a reliable source? And that's something that the BBC holds very dear. For example, in a war zone, we would make it clear, and there are one or two occasions where we might have done that, where there's a war zone where they don't actually let journalists in. We'll say, no journalists have access to this country, and we cannot verify whether this footage is accurate or not.